Detroit who preyed on young children and was caught, and then there was a case about it. And so I published a book about that. I did a book called The Public Image of Henry Ford, which is obviously connected to Detroit. I did a cookbook called Walnut Pickles to Watermelon Cake, A Century of Michigan Cooking. I did a book on the Saginaw Paul Bunyan stories, Paul Bunyan stories. I also did a book on Detroit, City of Race and Class Violence. So in other words, a variety of different kinds of books in different areas, but all about Detroit and the Great Lakes region. And, I've tapped into a market that other university presses had tapped into. Like in Indiana, they did a lot of books on Indiana, and Washington State did books on Washington State or the West Coast. And those books tended to sell better because obviously there were more people who were interested. Rather than a small sort of academic audience, there was a larger public audience for those books. So that series brought in a lot of income to the press, but also brought a lot of favorable publicity to the university. And that's what I found in that experience, that doing a regional series of books helps a university press, both financially, but also in terms of the image and its contribution to the state. I also, Detroit had a very large Jewish population, so, and they already had an existing there Jewish studies book series. I just expanded those series. I did a lot of fundraising. But this is where I became, as a director, you have to not only obviously sell books and bring in important books, but you have to balance the budget. And one of the key elements that I discovered early on was I might be able to raise some money outside the university to support the publication of books. And so I would approach various organizations. For example, I did a book on the bridge that connects Detroit to Windsor, Ontario. There's a bridge there. And I had a book that was sort of the history of that bridge. And so I went to the International Bridge Society, and I said, look, we're doing this book, it has all sorts of illustrations, I really could use your support to support the publication of this book. And that Bridge Authority gave me $20,000 to underwrite the publication of the book. Okay. So,
I'm not trying to interrupt you, but do you know what time it is?
Yeah, it's about 10 to 5.
Okay, I think I have to walk over to that place. I don't.
All right.
I'm so.
You want to come back tomorrow?
Well, I might be able to because my story is due later tonight. So.
Oh, it's not? Okay.
I could.
Let me give you a quick. What I can do is I'll give you a quick rundown, okay?
Okay.
Where I went from there, okay? So, I was at Wayne State, and I was there from 1985 to 1990, and after discovering that the regional books did so well and they were bringing in about a third of the income of the press, I decided, for the first time in my life, to take another risk, and I decided to establish my own publishing company. So I resigned from Wayne State University Press, and I established with another man as a partner a press called A&M Publishing, which we published books on the Great Lakes and on Michigan. And I took a big risk at that time. I second mortgaged my house to help fund the publishing house, and so did my partner. And we did pretty well. The very first book we did was a book written by the recently divorced wife of the sitting governor of Michigan. So, and it was about political wives.
Mm-hmm.
It was sort of a memoir of her. She had been recently divorced from the governor, and she had gone to a psychologist, and as a way to get over the divorce, she wrote down her sort of life story, and I published that life story. And that was the first book I published as a publisher.
Mm-hmm.
She was invited on the Good Morning America program. She was to Sally Jesse Raphael, to Geraldo Herrera,
Mm-hmm.
Geraldo, I can't remember how to pronounce his name. She went on all of those morning programs in New York City. And when she did a signing at the Barnes & Noble in Detroit, people were lined up around the block to get in to that book to be signed. And I sold the first serial rights to that book in a competition between the Detroit Free Press and the Detroit News. They competed over the first serial rights for that book, and the Detroit News won, and they gave me a significant sum of money
Mm-hmm.
to publish the first series of articles on the book. And that sort of launched my new company. And it took me 3 years to pay back all my loans. And 3 years later, I was offered a position as the director of Syracuse University Press. And at Syracuse, I was there at Syracuse from 1993 to 2000. And at Syracuse, I can go into I followed the same pattern I've done at other presses, where I developed these book series and so forth. And then what happened was, in 2000, I was very happy at Syracuse. I didn't want to leave. I enjoyed myself there. I was supported by the university,
Mm-hmm.
but I got an inquiry from the University of Wisconsin Press, asking me if I would be interested in applying for the directorship. And now that was of course, my alma mater. And so I resisted for a while. They actually wrote me a couple of times. And in the end, I decided, well, I'll go and interview.
Mm-hmm.
You know, although I wasn't really interested in leaving Syracuse. So I went for the interview, and it was a very good interview. And then, I guess about a month later, I got a call from them saying that they were interested in hiring me for the position. And I told them at that point that I really wasn't interested, because I had such great support at the university at Syracuse. I couldn't really imagine leaving. Make matters short, they made me an offer that I couldn't refuse. They offered to provide, additional funding for the university press to develop books, so in 2000 I left and became the director of University of Wisconsin Press in Madison, back to my old sort of alma mater.
Mm-hmm.
And for 6 years I developed that press in a whole variety of areas. I'll give you my list of books.
Okay.
And that'll show you what I developed there. But this was a period of time which was difficult for university presses,
Mm-hmm.
because all that expansion that occurred in the 80s and 90s started to contract in the early 21st century. Barnes & Nobles began to not expand as big as they were expanding all these stores all over the country in the 80s and the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
They were expanding less and buying less. There was a crisis in university press publishing in the early 21st century, making it more and more difficult for presses to reach their bottom line, to meet their bottom line. And so in 2006, I decided to live out a dream, which I'd always dreamed about. I always dreamed about going to Alaska, and there was a position open as the director of the University of Alaska Press. And I went up and interviewed for the job in Fairbanks, Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a nice break from what I was doing. It was a smaller press. I freedom to do what I wanted to do, and at the same time was going to the final frontier in America, and to, you know, to live out a dream in sort of the outdoor Alaska. And so I got the job, and between 2006 and 2008, I was the director of this very small press. It was published like 12 books a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I was managed to help develop that press and put it on a national footing. They were not getting their books sold in the United States. I joined the Chicago Distribution Center, which gave their books access to the lower 48.
Mm-hmm.
And so our sales went up significantly. I enjoyed living there. The only thing was it was very difficult, both for my wife and for me. You know, it was minus 25 to minus 50 in the wintertime.
Yeah.
And it was dark for all but 3 hours in the wintertime. And then in the summer it was light all the time. And during that period, 2006 to 2008, my wife got her PhD